My name is Michaela Owens, and my presentation is on women's fight for voting rights and how it differed in the West. We're taught that women earned the right to vote in 1920 due to the 19th Amendment. We're passingly taught that minority women didn't earn that right until many years after 1920. But what about the women who voted before the 19th Amendment? Voting laws differed exponentially in the West, allowing women to vote over half a century before the 19th Amendment was enacted. To begin research on suffrage for women, however, we must first investigate the true meaning behind women's desire to vote. What gave them this confidence and desire to be a part of history? While simply wanting to have their voices and opinions weigh on the political process is a good enough reason in and of itself, it's crucial that we pay attention to the specific issues late 19th century women wanted a say in, how it affected them, and why. John Green, in a YouTube segment, says women began to gain power from education. During this time period, it was customary of women to teach their children, and in order to do that, the mothers had to be educated. So while giving them this right wasn't really about wanting women to attend school, it still accomplished the same thing. Green says that women couldn't themselves participate in the political process, but they needed to be educated some because they were going to raise those who would later participate in the political process. Allowing these women to seek education made them increasingly more independent and eventually politically versed. Author Simon Heffer agrees in his piece, Founding Mothers, that the first conversations about feminism came from a similar conversation about education. The United Kingdom began women's colleges and programs, and America was quick to follow. Women began studying law, scientific theory, and of course, politics. What about women's active roles in history? A major undertaught lesson of women is that of prohibition. According to Kenneth D. Rose, in his peer-reviewed book American Women and the Repeal of Prohibition, there were few laws for men to abide by and wrote their own rules. Public drunkenness and the physical, verbal, and sexual abuse of women and children were commonplace and almost expected. Women wanted there to be repercussions for this, and their frustrations turned to action and affected every woman, feminist or otherwise. Heffer develops Rose's point by discussing that while some women wanted to vote in order to enact prohibition, others simply wanted the ability to divorce their abusers. In 1857 in the United Kingdom, there were 3 divorce cases. In 1858, there were 300 cases after an act was passed January 1st, making divorce more available to women. In regards to the United States, Green and Rose both assert that some of the most influential advocates for prohibiting the sale of alcohol were women, and that it was their premier issue. Green confirms that the most urgent reasons for women to want to vote in the mid-1800s were alcohol-related. Women even began to hold temperance lectures describing horror stories of men who used alcohol to deal with their problems. So while prohibition in itself wasn't a prime example of well-thought-out legislation, it did allow women to obtain significant leadership roles and made both male and female supporters of prohibition realize that women could be more powerful allies than they already are if they could actually vote. So what does this have to do with women voting in the West? While the 19th Amendment allowing white women to vote was a significant victory and large milestone for feminism, it meant basically nothing to women that resided west of the Mississippi River and few in northeastern states. Christopher Klein of History.com says the first territory and eventually the first state to allow women to vote was Wyoming. A bill for all women over the age of 21 to vote passed both houses of the all-male legislature in 1869, half a decade earlier than the 19th Amendment was enacted. The reason behind this bill is still debated today. Chuck Todd of MSNBC, in his segment The Daily Rundown, says that this was largely due to draw publicity to this new territory. He also claims men outnumbered women 6-1 and were likely trying to lure single women. Klein disagrees, however, and says that Wyoming showed several other signs of being a truly progressive state. There was no protest the following fall when women cast their first ballots. There were female judges, House representatives, and other political presences shortly following the bill that allowed them to vote, and surrounding states followed their lead almost immediately. The main example of Wyoming's modern state of mind is that it refused to take this right away from women while deciding to join the Union. In a statement to congressional leaders, the territory stood firm and that it will remain out of the Union 100 years rather than come in without the women. Don't you feel deceived having never been taught this information? I feel almost deprived of potential role models that were essential as a kid. Simply by accurately depicting and representing women's roles in history allowed me to develop an interest in history I didn't know I had. And at the very least, I think we can all agree that grade school kids deserve historically accurate lessons and authentic information. Representation of these women adds inspiration to the classroom and lights fires in young kids who follow them.